The following presentation was recorded at the 2013 SouthEast LinuxFest in Charlotte, North Carolina. It is licensed under a Creative Commons license. For more information about the SouthEast LinuxFest, visit www.southeastlinuxfest.org. The SouthEast LinuxFest would like to thank the following diamond sponsors in 2013 for helping make these videos possible.
Obviously, this mic system will handle most of my normal volume, which is this. But that's important because I'm going to need you to bear with me for the next... Yeah, there's no cutout. Awesome. So I'm going to spend a lot of time reading my slides backwards. I don't do podiums. I think they're sort of the crutch of public speaking. They're there to hide your shaking knees if you happen to be that or some other thing, I don't know, whatever else. My name is Mykel Alvis. I am a consultant for Momentum SI. Momentum SI is the leading IT consultancy in transformation. I have no idea what that means. Yeah. So, this is our website. They paid me to be here today, so you get to talk. I get to talk about them. You can even find me at that email address. But I am, in fact, nerd cred. I am lawful neutral with some lawful evil tendencies. I don't like people. I don't even like the people that I kind of pretend to like. It is extremely hard for me to form lasting emotional bonds with people, so I don't even bother. If I'm nice to you, it's because I want something from you. And I'm very likely to turn on you at any moment, so never trust me. Now, this is where I normally blog. That is not my work-related blog. It's fairly new. I think I've got like 6 posts on it. If you want to, you may read it there. This is my, let's see, what is that? Yeah, the first one, that's actually the Twitter account that I nerd blog on. And the other one is me. Don't follow me. Because first of all, I never tweet. And second, the stuff I do is usually pictures of food or other bullshit like that. So don't bother with that. Now, enough about me. Who the hell are you? So can I get a show of hands? Don't be afraid. I'm not going to call you out or move you around. Who in here is a software developer, considers themselves a software developer? Too many. Who in here considers themselves an operations person? This is primarily now about half and half. Okay. Who in here is a project manager or a manager of any ordinary sort, and they're not particularly nerdy? Excellent. That way I can talk about them. So, there are like 5 kinds of people that I really, really dislike in the world. And you guys are all of them. So maybe you're a release engineer. Do you know what this means? Nobody really does. They don't teach this in school. This is actually a thing you have to learn on your own by getting your face punched in about 70 times by some asshole that's a software developer or a manager or probably a project manager. Now, you might be a system administrator. System administration, that's hilarious. You might be a system administrator. Sure, this is your job. What you do is you manage systems. But probably you get stuck with all of the release management part of this because somewhere along the way somebody asked you to deploy some software. Now, if you're in management and you're in this room, you have made a grave tactical error. Because I am absolutely going to talk smack about you the entire time. But even worse, if you are a software developer, you have made a really grave tactical error. I have been a software developer for 34 years. I have been a professional software developer for 31 of those 34 years. And there is nothing in the world I hate worse than a software developer. I understand there's some self-loathing about that, but once again, I don't make emotional bonds even to me, so I'm okay with that. I don't dislike software developers because of what they do. Software development is a fine discipline, blah, 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 blah. It's the wave of the future. If you were raised in the 80s, computers are the wave of the future. Let's go get a job. And you went to these places and you had to learn how to do the deed. If you went to a good school, maybe, then you maybe came out as a software developer, but you probably didn't. You probably got a computer science degree instead. Don't mistake the two. Having a CS degree is not the same thing as being a software developer. Don't clap so much. Having an LPI cert does not make you a system administrator. Most of these things are complete BS. Now, I'm going to talk about some things that you probably have a different term for, but if you do, shut up, these are mine. I want to talk about what's called an artifact. An artifact has a definition of it is a thing that is made by man. Anything that is made by man is technically an artifact. This is really meant to be durable things that you can touch, but no, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about software stuff. This is signature. Everything in the world has a unique signature. It is different from all other things. And the signature of an artifact distinguishes it from another instance of that same artifact. These are the words we're going to use from now on. If you don't like my terms, I challenge you to make a better one. Accessibility is when people can actually use your stuff. It's available to be used. And finally, delivery is when it's actually usable by a customer. Now, you need to understand something. I primarily work in the enterprise development world, which, if you have real jobs, you probably do too. But in the instance that you don't understand what enterprise development is, it's the really boring part of software development. It's where people make you do stupid crap all the time just to, you'll jump through this flaming hoop, Mr. Alvis. Yes, ma'am. Oh, sorry, you got to jump back. You didn't do it quite right. Now, we're talking about building stuff here. Building things like software, but not just software. Software has a much broader scope in my definition because I'm not really a software developer anymore. I'm actually what we like to refer to as a DevOps consultant. Now, if you happen to think you know what DevOps is, congratulations. You and that and 50 cents will buy you a quarter of a cup of coffee at Starbucks. But one of the things that we do in DevOps is we manage configuration. We talk about configuration of applications and systems and how they work toward deployment, and how deployment is actually the only thing you do in software. You deliver software or you don't do your job. The problem that I have experienced across the last 30-odd years is that people, like everybody in this room, including me, do not focus on the delivery process. They are not focused on delivering the value of what they produce. Now, I'm going to overload the term build to mean build and compile, make, package, a bunch of other things that you might have a distinction on, but honestly, if you step at about 10,000 feet, they all look the same. Now, the creation and compilation of the software is what I'm talking about in building. This might be you packaging an RPM that somebody else wrote the code for. You still built something. That spec file had a thing. Nobody just pulled that out of their butt. Somebody had to write it. Now, releasing a piece of software means giving a piece of software an actual signature. It is a line in stone, not a line in sand. This is a real thing. By the way, these are all opinions of mine. Did I mention that I'm highly opinionated? When you release software, you mean to do so to deploy it. You're going to make a particular instance of software available to somebody. If you don't think you do this, raise your hand. Well, let me rephrase that. If you have a job that's approximately what I described, and you don't think you do this, raise your hand. Or if you think I'm wrong. That's what I thought. So, here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about a bunch of bad stuff. We're going to talk about friction. Friction is the thing that keeps people from getting stuff done. We're going to talk about how stupid you are when you make versions of software. We're going to talk about your inability to determine what you actually need to do your job, and how you never write tests. We're going to talk about how you have tons of issues and you never know what all of them are, and you are really crappy at delivering packages that work. Finally, we're going to, I'm sorry, that's not finally, whoops. You don't really deliver, and the worst thing is you have the worst culture in the world. Why is this? It's because you suck at building software. Everybody does. This is not, we're all sitting in the muck at the bottom. Everybody sucks at this to a certain degree. Why is that? It's because humans are terrible at everything. We are the worst at everything, but we recover heavily. If we break it, if we did it wrong, we look and go, shit, I did it wrong. And somebody goes, well, why don't you do it right? And I'm like, well, why don't I do it right? All right, so we're going to talk about some good stuff, but really we're not going to talk about that much good stuff because they don't really want me up here talking about good stuff. That's not very entertaining. But we are going to talk about a few solutions. We're going to try to identify some weak spots, and we're going to try to categorize the outputs of your build. Sorry, I slept in a really cold room last night. Now a little thing. We have streamlining delivery processes. We're going to try to deliver usable artifacts out of a process, and we're going to try to build software successfully. I'm going to try to walk you through a process that might look like that. Now, we're going to finally, hopefully, talk about good culture. Guess what? I lied. We're going to talk about it first, because every problem that you have ever experienced that was not actually a technical issue, where you didn't know how to write code or how to do a delivery, was based somewhere in culture. Every single one of them. Culture is a meme. It is a thing, it is a thought that works like a virus that you get from other people. And when you get to a place where culture sucks, the next thing you know, you suck. You don't mean to. You walk in with the greatest of intentions. Who has ever walked into a job excited to be there and left very unhappy? Anybody? Yeah, I thought so. You go in and you think, oh, I'm going to kick ass and take names, and you walk out and you're like, I got fired for that? Really? Man, that place sucks. Well, yeah, it does. Now, one of the things about enterprise software development, and enterprise software in general, not just development, is it's particularly drone-focused. We're feature-driven. I have a feature. I have to implement the feature. I'm implementing the feature. Software developers are feature-driven. You have to go make a thing happen that didn't happen before. But that's pretty much all developers want to do. Well, that's not all there is to it. You are uncommunicative. You don't talk to other people. You don't communicate. Talking isn't even all of it. You don't communicate well. Why do you not communicate well? Because you're a human being and we suck at everything. Communication included. Now, I spend an awful lot of time, strangely enough, around professional magicians. I won't even just go into why. But the art of illusion and sleight of hand is an amazing thing because people don't understand how they can do cold readings, how they produce stuff allegedly out of thin air. And it's because you suck at looking at stuff. You fill in the blanks in your head. You lie to yourself. Everything you perceive happened in the past. Always. It takes a little while for the light to get to you. It takes a little while for you to write it onto the storage medium. And your wetware sucks. What was the name of the guy who sat next to you in first grade? You don't freaking know. Because it doesn't matter. You go, oh, man, I'll wipe it out. What did you have for breakfast 4 weeks ago? If you don't eat the same thing every day, chances are good you don't know. And it's because you don't communicate well with yourself either. Now, enterprises are amazingly good at preventing communication because they build silos. They are not unique in this area. Open source projects also build silos, but they're just a little more transparent. Ultimately, a silo is a mechanism to prevent communication. You can't talk to that guy because he's in the wrong group. Now, you can talk to your manager, who talks to his manager, who talks to that guy, to that guy, to that guy. And by the time you're done, the telephone game has made it so that nobody knows what the hell anybody's talking about in the first place. I don't think I'm alone in having experienced this. Now, one of the things that I really hate about enterprise software developers is to them, they have no passion. Frequently, they are there to get a paycheck and walk away. I don't begrudge anybody for wanting to make money at what they do. But if you do not love what you do, go rent jet skis at the beach. Don't do things that you don't love to do. And if you love to do it, work at it. And I'm not saying stay until midnight every night. That's stupid. Have a life, because you need a life. But if your focus is tick, 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 ding, I'm out of here. I got soccer practice to take my kids to, and I got church and college football, and that's all my life is. Well, okay, sure. Bad culture does not have a speedometer. Nobody knows how fast or slow they're going because they are all busy trying to look busy. We don't know how well we're doing. We couldn't tell you because we don't really track that here. Now, bad culture accepts this because it is programmed to do so. That's why it's bad. If you changed how you were, it wouldn't be bad anymore. Well, maybe it would. But even if it was, at least it would be different. Now, I have coined a term. Everybody follow me on this term. Enterprise level apathy. This is where I don't care anymore about what I do. I'm punching the ching-ching. You ever seen that Doonesbury where they have the line of guys, I think it's Doonesbury, and the guy's pulling the lever, and there's a line of people behind him, and if the light goes on and he fails to pull the lever, he drops through a trap door, and the next guy steps forward? If you are apathetic about your job, you're just one of those guys in the line. Don't be one of those guys. Now, I'm going to say something that is contraindicated in the open source world. And I don't really want to say it, but it's true. If you have a hero in your organization, they are the most evil person there. They make everything bad. Oh, everybody looks sad at me right now. Really? Have you ever had a really, really good developer walk out of you in the middle of a project and take all of his intellectual capital with him and leave you in the shit? No? Really? Oh, okay, at least a couple of people. Heroes are villains. People must be heroic. But ultimately, a hero becomes a crutch for everybody else. That's the deployment guy. He knows how to do deployments. You mean you don't know how to do deployments? Well, we have the deployment guy. Well, why do you have the deployment guy? Because it's hard to do deployments. So what happens if he gets hit by a bus? Well, we don't have a deployment guy anymore. Well, that's damned unfortunate, isn't it? What's going to happen after that? Now, if you're trying to make good culture, normally you would swallow a pill. You know, you've had a bit of a stomach bug, or maybe you had to take some antibiotics. And you're going to swallow a few probiotics. Hopefully those will make your culture get better. Now, communicate, damn it. You can't get any better at software development or being alive if you are bad at communication. I am not good at communication. I'm good at shouting at people. This is not necessarily communication. This has very poor quality. But at least it gets an idea across that maybe you weren't paying attention to, that you weren't communicating well. Well, let's make that happen. Now, if you're going to focus on improving something, you need to focus on it and its definition, because you probably don't know what quality means in every aspect of your life. Well, you're not expected to. You're just a approximately 147-pound meat sack walking around with a 3-pound wetware processor in its melon, and for goodness sake, you can't know everything. You're not expected to. But hopefully you can learn to do that. You did it wrong. Figure out how to do it right. If you increase your speed, you must know how you measure your speed. This is an incredibly important part to improving any process. If you don't know how fast you're going, how the hell do you know if you're going faster or slower or whatever? You want to reduce defects and manage costs. This is a watched word in project management forever, but it actually matters to your regular life as well. But in software, these things have very specific meanings. Things cost and defects cost. And you're trying to reduce these things. That needs to be one of the things that improvements do. Now, I don't care anymore. I'm not talking to y'all. Well, this presentation went south quickly, didn't it? What happens if I become apathetic about telling you this story? Well, you don't care. You're like, well, when's the raffle? But ultimately, what you want to do is eliminate apathy. The elimination of apathy is the presence of passion. If you have no passion, then you are probably apathetic. And if you have passion, it is impossible to be apathetic. Now, we're going to talk about the piece. Remember I talked about culture. It was going to be the last thing we talked about, and it turns out to be the first thing. Everything else goes in order. So, friction is the impediment to a process, whatever that might be. Understand that everything I'm talking about is process engineering. The process of delivering software is very much like the process of building a car. It's more or less an assembly line. You have some guy that designs it and they carve it all out of the clay and bullshit like that, and then somebody goes, well, I can cut this up and make this quarter pound. And you have a line that chung, 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 chung. And now, of course, you have big robots that weld stuff, and that's pretty awesome too. But this is all a process. Friction impedes processes. Ultimately, all friction is human introduced. Now, I know you go, oh, no, sometimes machines break. Well, of course machines break. We know that. You're not going to fix that. The only thing you can do is improve your monitoring and hopefully catch it beforehand. That's not really friction. Almost everything that is friction in a process that we're talking about is human introduced. Maybe you forgot to do something. Oh man, I forgot to turn on the framboise before I deployed the software. Oh, I forgot to change that from 4 to 6, and now everybody's dead. So maybe there's something that you have to do that's manual. You know, oh, yeah, and unless you go and stand in this corner and jump on one foot for a little while, the presentation can't go on. Really? You know, this happens everywhere. Obviously not the jumping in the corner thing, but I have a great story to tell you. I used to do delivery or deployments of software, and there was a build that I built this build, and it was perfect. It puked out perfectly acceptable Java code at the other end, your opinion about that notwithstanding. And I leave it for a while, and I come back, and they go, I try to do the deployment again. They're like, hey, no, in the middle of the build, you have to stop the build, and then you have to deploy the intermediate artifact to Tomcat before you repackage the results of that and then deploy it onto WebSphere. And I was like, you're lying. I am not making this up. And I know, I wish I was, believe me. And I said, that's just a lie. That can't possibly be true. And they're like, yeah, we don't know how to fix it. Well, yeah, you don't know how to fix it because you haven't freaking tried. Because maybe you're not good enough to fix it. But damn it, that is a serious impediment. Like, it was beautifully waiting to be automatically deployed at the end. And now I have to stop. I have to Control C in the middle of a build as soon as a couple of log messages come up. Are you kidding me? But these things happen. Maybe you have to do something extraneous, like ask for permission. Maybe you don't have permission to do what you want to do, and you have to go ask for it. This is friction, but it's not necessarily always bad friction. Sometimes it's best if you ask for permission, but that's not the only extraneous thing you might have to do. It's sort of like that whole, got to hit Control C, and we got to build this, and got to deploy it in Tomcat, and it makes a magic file somehow. Really? Now, the most common friction is lack of communication. If you do not talk to other people, communicate with them, deliver your intent and receive their intents, you've created a barrier for any movement forward. Now, the second most common is project managers. I have met a couple of project managers that I thought added to a process, and I've been in software for 34 years. And I said a couple because I can count them with these fingers. Fortunately, those two people don't know who they are. And so this video, every project manager I've ever worked in, they're like, oh, I'm one of those guys. No, you're probably not, because I've worked with a hell of a lot of project managers. I am just kidding, sort of. Because project managers are not the most evil thing in software development. They're just kind of useless. Why are they kind of useless? Because project managers are meant to facilitate things in the course of a project, and without fail, what they are is Microsoft project monkeys. I don't like the idea that somebody is trying to track my time abstractly and that they think that I can do it, that they can replace me with resource B. But that's okay. I mean, it's not personal like that. But if you don't add value to a process, you are probably introducing friction. Now, if you have friction, you probably want some lubrication. Read these two books. If you have not read these two books, the first one is by Gene Kim, and the second one is by Jez Humble, and they actually have other authors. Seriously, if you have not read these books, these need to be the next two things you do in your life. I am not kidding. The Phoenix Project is it's a novel of all things. It's a novel about software development. I know that sounds really super exciting. but it actually gives you a really good mechanism for communicating and introduces an enormous number of concepts that you will find very useful to other people who understand those concepts. All communication requires some form of shared concept. And if you don't have it, it's very difficult to bridge that gap until you make shared context. These things will help you with that. There's this other book called The Inmates Running the Asylum. It is less important than those. But it's an okay book. It is. Now, after the reading, I'm going to say things that are very, very unpopular, like standardize your tool set. Everybody here is freedom, 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 freedom. Freedom, 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 freedom. I am in the free software movement. This is free and open source software. I get to do whatever the hell I want. Sure you do. I mean, it's your project, right? But standardization, patterns, contexts that are shared with other people, these things are lubrication to processes. And destandardized tool sets are not. You don't know how to use Vim. Okay. Well, we don't use Vim. We use Emacs. Well, I don't use Emacs. What do you use? Notepad? Notepad++. Really? Well, that's not what we do. And they're like, oh, it's just code. I can just write it. But when you're communicating with somebody else, let's say when they walk over to your desk and you're like, oh, I've got this thing. They're like, what the hell are you editing this with? Notepad++. Are you kidding me? We all use Vim. Well, I'm not telling you that you need to use Vim. What I'm saying is that standardized tool sets are a mechanism for communication. Do your Java developers use IntelliJ and Eclipse? If they do, there are some problems with that. If they use IntelliJ or Eclipse, there are less problems. There's metadata associated with a project in both of these things that becomes very cumbersome when you try to move it to the other one. Very, very, very cumbersome. Now, this is where I used to live. Standardization of build pipelines is probably the most lubricating thing you can possibly do. Build pipelines are from the beginning to the end working software. If you do not standardize that build pipeline, if you're in open source software, you're only making one thing, well, you already have a standardized pipeline because you're only making one thing. But as soon as you make two things and they have two different ways of building them, they're not standardized anymore. I'm not going to go into the what, how, or why. For instance, I used to be a big Maven guy. And if you're a Java developer, you probably hate Maven because you probably don't understand builds. But if you hate Maven, it's because Maven did something to you. Now, Maven does stuff to people, but it is a hell of a standardization for build pipelines if you get it working correctly, which generally takes somebody like me who is abysmally focused on making that happen. When you get that done, it turns out that I can go from project to project to project to project to project, and I can get all of my work done. Now, I'm not saying Maven is good or bad. I'm actually saying Maven is good, but I'm not really saying Maven is good or bad. Your mileage is going to vary. But standardization in those things, that has great value. That has objective value. Design your software so it is not so special. What do I mean by this? Software is intrinsically special, or it's just a copy. But if you're writing, let's say, I'll kick Java for a little while. If you're writing Java software that has to be deployed in a certain way, I gotta hold my mouth right, or this doesn't. If I have to do weird stuff, if there are hoops I have to jump through to make it happen, if it doesn't talk on standard protocols, you know, I don't really like this whole JMS thing. Let's make our own. I'm going to make my own messaging protocol. Really? You're an asshole. Because if you don't use the standards that exist, you better have a damn good reason for it. Well, JMS isn't fast enough. Okay, maybe. Or is there anything that's more standard than your magic protocol that might be faster than JMS? Maybe. Well, maybe there is. Don't make your shit special. Attempt to reach stability and test everything all the time. Test everything. If you do not write tests now, it is because you are exactly like 95% of software developers. They don't write tests. And once you get people who write tests, people who start writing tests, they are a member of the cult of the converted. It's almost like being a Mac guy. You're like, oh, I got to wear the turtleneck now. I'm going to wear the turtleneck. Test-driven people, and I don't mean test-driven development people, I mean people who drive towards tests, see a thing you don't see yet. But if you don't write tests, why not give it a shot and see if you get some value out of it? Yes, testing is a pain in the ass. Technically speaking, testing is harder than the code that you're writing against. Therefore, the quote goes, if I wrote the code as well as I possibly could, I'm not qualified to write the test. Well, find somebody smarter than you. Get tests around your code. It has incredible value. And automate the hell out of everything. Every piece of your process, somewhere. Let's say, Richard was talking about this morning, well, we have to plug and unplug cables. I can automate that. Hell, you know, I've got microcontrollers at home. That's not hard. You have to plug and unplug. Oh, that's you know, get one of those little the little servo things that close and open doors. Sure, we can make that happen. Now, I'm not saying you should do that. Yes, I am. I'm not saying that that's the thing you should do first. But anything in software can be automated. It's just sometimes the returns aren't so great. But if you can, automate it. This is the part of my talk where I get pissed off. I've been up pretty normal up until now. Now I'm going to get actually angry. People who write software do not understand the context that versions give you. Let's take this one, for instance. Anybody know where that came from? R23434. That's a subversion revision number. If you tie versions of your software to a revision number, you are an asshole. Because that's just your repository. What happens when you have to unload and reload? Now I have to make sure all the revision numbers are the same. Now, by the way, I have like a bunch of these examples. I got them from real places. These are not made up. I did change all of the values so that nobody would get their feelings hurt. But these are all real versions. Dates. If you version your software with a date, which is very popular in open source software, you are an asshole. The only thing it tells us is when something happened. We don't know if that's when the release was occurred. That might have been your kid's birthday. We don't know. It has no real context to it. On that note, hit that link. There is an ISO standard for the correct way to put a date in the world. If you do it any other way, you suck. By the way, can anybody tell me what date is that? Nope, the answer is no. The answer is no, you cannot. You can give me a few examples, but you don't know what date it is. The correct way to do a date is a four-digit year, followed by a two-digit month, followed by a two-digit day. And why is that? Because it sorts. And if you don't do it so it sorts, you're an asshole. Now, it starts to get weird after this. I didn't have to look hard, but I found some. Weirder. Good call, good call. Embedded tags. Who the hell is Jeremy and what's June 3rd? Is that June his daughter, or is that June the month after May? I don't know. I never thought about it. By the way, the June 3rd is actually directly from some non-RPM package that I found. So maybe it was the third wife. Now this one is the worst. I changed that word, that number. I changed letters in that string. And I substituted 2 words for this. But I shit you not, this is a real package somewhere. Effectively. Now, if you're writing software, versions imply context. They mean something. What do they mean? They mean an identity. They are the signature of your code. They are a thing that makes version 1 different from version 2. What is the difference in version 1 and version 2? Does anybody know the normalized difference between version 1 and version 2? Of course you do. Now, they're like tags, and they have some similarities, and they usually are bound to tags in source code control, but they are not tags. That's not the same thing. They express a signature that should be universally understandable. You have an API. Your software, whatever it is, has an API. whether you like to think about it or not. Sometimes it's a shitty GUI, but whatever. You have an API. You have a way that you interact with other stuff. And this signature determines that, and I ought to be able to determine which one it is, and whether it's newer or older than one. The mechanism for communicating dependencies and with dependencies is your versioning. And if you don't use semantic versioning, you're kind of an asshole. Go to this link. It is one page. This shit makes more sense than anything in software. I am not kidding. Now, this is not news. Now, it's the guy from GitHub, Tom blah, 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 whatever his name is. Somebody knows. But he wrote this down, and people went, huh, well, that's actually that's pretty smart. And the reason that it's pretty smart is not because it's smart, but because other people think it is. And if they follow your pattern, it's awesome. And if they don't, and like you've got 3,000 people that follow a pattern and 40 that don't, who's wrong here? Nobody's wrong. Wrong. But who made the mistake? This is the way semantic versioning works. Now, this got a bunch of other crap on it that doesn't really matter. But major, minor, patch. 3 digits for a version of your software. Oh, we like 4 digits. Well, screw you. You don't need 4 digits. 3 digits works. Major changes break API. Minor changes introduce backward compatible API changes, and patches do not change API. What is the API of your software? Well, that basically depends on your software. But if you follow these rules and you say, my software is semantically versioned, many smart people will understand what the hell you're talking about. I promise you, if you take nothing else away from this other than there's a shouty bald guy, take this with you and use it. Stop giving me dates. Stop giving me stupid long strings for versions that I don't understand. Stop giving me dates. Did I say dates? Stop giving me dates. Now, the cool thing about versioning well is that it works well with roadmaps. We're going to talk about roadmaps. But we're not going to talk about it right now. You have issues. You don't probably know what they are. There's probably some stuff you don't know. You might have an issue tracker in your software. You might have one, but you probably don't know what all your issues are. That's why they are. That's why they exist. If you knew what they are to begin with, you would probably have them recorded and you'd be working on them. You probably can't define the directed graph for your sets of dependencies. Probably not. Most people can't. This is a real problem in a few worlds, but anything that has dependencies, which is everything, has this problem to a certain degree. So there's this joke about Maven. I tried to build, and Maven attempted to download the internet. Well, yeah, it's pretty quick, it's intensive at the beginning. But if you use proxies and that sort of thing, it doesn't really matter. But don't expand the list of dependencies that you have just because you think you might need it. Don't kitchen sink your build. You probably don't know how to update your dependencies very well. Why don't you not? Because you don't know what they are. You've got some piece of code, some jar file is in a lib directory in your source code system. If you have a jar file committed to the lib in your Java application, you have screwed up. Because there are tools that help you stop doing that. It's like a 12-step program. The first thing you have to understand is that you had a problem. And after that, go get Gradle, Maven, Ivy, anything. It's the same. Gems are the same way. I mean, there's what's the Ruby thing? Bundler. Exactly so. I'm not really a huge fan of Bundler, but But it does the job, and that's what matters. You don't have any idea usually what's going to happen. We're going to update commons logging from 1.2.14 to 1.2.15. Not make it work or not, because sometimes that happens. Now, to manage them, you have to do it. You just have to make it happen. If you have jar files living inside your code, or if you have pieces of code that came from magic places on the internet, go find out what the sources of those things are. And if those people don't have versions for them, make a version for it. And then go back and tell those people what jackasses they are for not giving you a real version. Now, transitive dependencies, the dependencies of your dependencies, are also very important. If you think you don't have this problem, then you probably don't work in software. If you think it doesn't apply to you because you're making Puppet modules or Ansible playbooks or building RPMs, you are wrong. You are terribly, terribly, terribly wrong. They degrade if not maintained. Bit rot is a real thing. It doesn't really happen. The rot is in your mind. Because as I said earlier, we suck at everything, including remembering how to do stuff. And so you're like, why is this version 3.5? Oh. Well, the new version 3.6, that'll probably work. Well, if they followed semantic versioning, it probably would, but use a tool that manages them. Get a tool. If your build tool doesn't manage dependencies automatically, get a new tool. I don't care what it is. And use it. Don't not use it. This is the boring part. We're going to get through this in a minute, I promise. You also need to map the actual dependencies that you use. Frequently, people depend on the concept of transitive nature in dependencies. I depend on X, X depends on Y. I really depend on Y, but I do it through X is one thing. But if I really depend directly on Y, but I don't include that as a dependency in my dependency graph, because, well, X depends on Y, it'll be okay. Well, then your graph isn't right. You need your graph to be right. And if you can, use a dependency proxy so that you have some mechanism for caching things. Like, for instance, Red Hat Satellite or repo sync. If you happen to, or if RPMs are what you're depending on in the course of building a system, get a copy of the repo. Don't depend on other people's crap, because they will fail on you. Other people suck too, remember? Now, testing. This is where shit really breaks down, because people don't do this. You implicitly pass 100% of them that you're never written. And you can make an entirely false claim that your software passed tests which weren't executed. If you redefine the definition of pass, it is right and good. This is actually, I believe this deeply. It is right and good to release 100% of cases where you don't care what the test results are. Has anybody ever turned testing off in their application because the tests make the build break? Anybody? Yeah. You know why the tests made the build break? Because that's what they're supposed to do. And when you turned it off, you sort of hamstrung yourself a little bit there. Now, testing is what I did to my parents' patience. I was a precocious child. I was a short, fat kid in rural Alabama. And so I had a lot of questions. And my parents didn't have a lot of answers because my dad was a coal miner and my mom was an accountant. Well, she was a bookkeeper. And they didn't have a lot of answers for my things, so they made me go figure it out myself. But I did test their patience quite a bit. Testing is great, but they will only detect broken things. They rarely detect real success. And they will only detect the things that you test. So if you're that guy who turned off tests, they don't detect any breakages. If you don't write them, they are not there. Duh. And the one thing that happens to test every time is nobody updates their tests. Why? Anybody in here who said they turned off tests to make a build work, was it because they used to work? And now you've written code because some jackass ahead of you in the food chain said, you have to implement this new feature. And you're like, that feature's going to break the test. And they're like, screw the tests. And you're like, yeah, okay. -D, skip test equal true. Now, there is a pedantic way to describe getting your test to work. You write an easy test, you write another easy test, you write a test not so easy, and you just repeat until you're done. Nobody does this. People talk about it like they do. Testing has to be a thing you focus on. It can't be this, oh, well, we're going to write a test. Well, okay, I'm going to write one test. I'm going to write an accessor test on an object. That's a dumb test, by the way, but people need it. People like that. I got a test. We got 75% coverage. Oh, well, that's because 80% of the methods on your objects are accessors, and you've written accessor tests for them. Set A to 2. If get A equals 2, test pass. Well, that's stupid. Now, One of the ways you can get past this is you can simply accept that you are not going to execute any of your tests. Suck it up. You're going to have shitty software. That's the way it is. But that is, in my experience, probably 90% of the software that I was commanded to write, that I was allowed to write. If you work for big faceless organizations like I did, frequently this is what you're going to have. Now, you can outsource your tests. You could find somebody else to write your tests for you. It is fairly cheap to hire offshore resources. I am not suggesting that you give money to other countries to write your tests. Yes, I am. It is an entirely valid mechanism here. If you have the ability to communicate what success would be, and they have the ability to write a test, you win, and it was probably dirt cheap. Now, you can produce targeted tests based on past issues. Our software sucks. But here's one of the things that suck. Let's write a test for the thing that sucks. That one thing, write one test. That test is the most relevant one I've talked about so far because it actually tests for a problem. And if till that test passes, that thing will continue to suck. This is one that I am very fond of. Bring candy. Software people love candy. They love it. They love scotch and candy. And if you bring them stuff with some frequency, you can get them to do stuff they don't want to do. I get it. I have a dog. I actually have two dogs. But I have a rat terrier. He's excitable. But if I have a treat in my hand, that is the most attentive animal in the face of the earth. Glenlivet. Question for anybody. If I offered you a $100 bottle of tequila, if you drink tequila, pick your favorite, whatever. You know, hookers and blow, I don't care what it is. If I offered you $100 of anything to write 3 tests, what would your next step be? Good question. Yeah, but yes, you would probably do it because I'm giving you a thing. Incentivize this. It actually worked. I promise I've seen it happen. I've made it happen. I'm not, once again, we walked back to the beginning. I'm not very good with people. I can only make you do stuff by making you afraid of me or by bribing you. I'm not as good at the second one as I am at the first one, but I've been a bouncer for 21 years, so now it's all ingrained in me. Now, you have issues, I guarantee it. They are everywhere. You have lots of them. And you don't know how to classify them, and you don't know if you can actually solve them. If you knew, you would do this already. This would be, you guys wouldn't be here. You'd be like, I'm code monkey. I got to fix like issues. You might know what the list is, but having a list of issues, knowing what's wrong, is incredibly important to the process of fixing what's wrong. Now, you have deficiencies in these issues. They're not always right. We are human. We suck at everything. It's going to be the case. But if you have an issue, you can make that issue fixable at some point in the future. I can tell you definitively that we are fixing bug X-1745 in release 1.2.9, I swear to God. You can do that. Now, if you have issues, you obviously need some way to keep them. The most recent funny way that I've seen is in a spreadsheet. Why was it in a spreadsheet? Because a project manager, remember I talked about project managers, a project manager didn't know how to run Jira. So somebody had to do an automated dump of Jira, and I mean dump in exactly the way you think, to a spreadsheet so that this dipshit could actually use the data. Now, get a good issue tracker and make it so that everybody knows how to use it. This is part of your job. It's like learning how to use a source code control system. If you're a software engineer and you don't know how to do a merge, get your ass out of this room and go learn how to do it. I know dozens of software engineers who cannot do a merge in any system successfully. In this room, it's probably not so common, but it might be. I'm not judging and don't answer. But honestly, if you don't know how to use your tool, the base level tool set, go learn. That's your job. Now, when you get your issue tracker, try to use it the way it was intended to be used. They're not all meant to be used the same way. Generally, there's a workflow for managing issues. And if you go against the workflow or you try to make the workflow do something funky that it's not meant to do, that the tool's not meant to do, you will suffer a little bit. There will be additional friction. I suggest, in the course of writing, of using an issue tracker, is that every single thing you produce is a project in that. You know what? I don't know what project means in your particular tracker, but some separated and classifiable set of things separate from other artifacts. And lots of people don't agree with me about this. I include projects that are not software. Sales cycles was a thing that we had great success with at a previous company. We would make a project. Selling to customer Baz was a project, and we tracked it like that. And it actually kind of worked. I know it's crazy, but it did. You should always go back and look at what is in your issue tracker, because if you do not remember it, why don't you remember it? Because you suck at everything. You can't remember it. There's no way. That's what you have computers for. They're offload storage for your meat. Now, roadmaps. So you'll notice this is a new slide. It didn't have the transitions. Sorry. By the way, I got a question. Does everybody hate this font as much as I do? No. So yes and no. Right, got it. In issue trackers, generally you have a thing called a roadmap. A roadmap is a targeted release that we talked about just a minute ago. It's version something of this project. These things are essential to communication. Communication is what causes most friction. If you tell somebody, I'm going to fix bug 5 in release 7.3, then you have made a commitment to that, and that should be in a roadmap. These things, targeting releases, specific changes to a signature is everything. Letting people know what your plans are is important. We know you're slacking off to a certain degree. We know that you've put off the hard work to the next release because you want the easy work to go out this time so that you'll make your bonus. We know this. But even if you have to pony up the data and tell us, at least we know what you're going to do later. Now, packaging is the place where the next set of stuff goes really, really crappy. People suck at this. I know, because this is where I lived forever. Forever being the last 7.5 years. They suck at this. How many people in here are an RPM packager themselves? They write spec files, like 7, 5, 11, whatever. You write spec files. Do you think you're good at it? No? Why are you not good at it? Shit's hard. Writing a good spec file is difficult. I actually got into a bit of a tiff with an RPM guy, with one of the RPM 5 developers, because I was trying to make an RPM of this package that came from a vendor whose name I'm not going to mention, but it had Perl built into the package. The executable for Perl was in the tarball that I got from the vendor. And all I wanted to do was take this damn tarball and drop it onto the file system. Do you know how hard that is in RPM? It's damned hard. Why is it so hard? Well, because RPM is really smart, and it says, oh, you've got a library in there, and I happen to know where that library comes from, and you now have implicit dependencies. Well, yeah, but I didn't. I had it right here. I actually resolve it all internally. It took me a week to do this. I had no idea what I was doing, and I've written hundreds of spec files. It took me a week. It took him 3 days to get the data out of me to answer the question, and then it took him another day to give me an answer that wasn't him being an asshole. But, I'm not kidding. I mean, you guys have met some of the RPM developers, I guess? That's probably true. So, it is hard to write packages in anything. Writing eggs in Python is a bit of a pain in the ass. Writing gem files is not the hardest thing in the world, but it's kind of a pain. And it is the mechanism by which the normal human uses your stuff. What's your distro look like? Oh, it's an RPM. Well, it runs in Linux, and it's an RPM-based thing, or it's a Debian-based thing. So we write RPMs in Debian, or in Deb packages because, well, we got Linux users. Well, okay. If I go download your RPM, and I do yum local install RPM or whatever I do, and it freaks out on me, and you don't work well with my distro, that's not my fault. That's actually your fault. It's because you didn't do it right. Why didn't you do it right? Because it's hard. It's not, it's probably not what you're getting paid to do, because you're probably not getting paid to do it at all. But it's hard to do that. It doesn't have correct contextual metadata. That metadata, your dependency graph that we talked about earlier, is terribly important. It'll have incorrect metadata. This is my favorite. If your packaging produces incorrect metadata, you did it wrong badly. It is unavailable to other people. Oh yeah, you have to hold your mouth right and go through this EULA and click through and blah, 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 blah. It's hard to get to or impossible to get to your package. This frequently happens inside enterprises. Group A is building something that Group B must use, but somebody has to put on a USB drive and carry it across the building because whatever, because people are stupid. It is difficult to track back to the source and requirement. Well, we're all guilty of this. If all changes in your project, in the source code of your project, do not go back directly to some known reason and issue, you're kind of doing it wrong, but this is the one thing I'll probably let you off on, because that is such a pain in the ass. Now, saying that, if you manage to write a large application that has requirement tracking all the way back without being a member of the government and having roomfuls of paper and taking 40 years to do it, you have done something that I have literally never seen in my life, ever. I've never seen anyone do that correctly. When you're writing software, when we talk about packaging, we talk about putting it in a usable container. That container can be any kind of thing. Zip files or jars or RPMs or debs or what was the other one? Or Puppet modules, whatever. Tools around that are the mechanism for making that. Do not attempt to roll your own. I know a guy who writes RPMs using his own executable. Yeah. Anybody think that's a good idea? No? It's because it's not. It's a terrible idea. He gets an RPM that comes out of his build process, because he's got a build process that eventually wraps it up in there. But it's mostly right. As far as I know, it's right as hell. I can install it. But do you trust that guy? I don't. The actual step of packaging produces an artifact. Remember, an artifact is a thing we're building. That's what we're really talking about here. Now, there's a bunch of ways that you fail to deliver. You can deliver not at all. We were supposed to release version 6.7 on Tuesday. We just didn't, and the customer is pissed. Well, the customer can be pissed, but at least the customer isn't having bad stuff happen, like, I don't know, things that are vaguely incorrect but not damaging. Or things that are potentially or passively dangerous, data destroying. I don't know, software that controls pacemakers that suddenly goes awry. Then there's the actively dangerous software that is meant to destroy pacemakers. So I don't think anybody does this intentionally. I think everybody does it a little bit out of laziness. And I blame Larry Wall completely. Mr. Wall, I'm terribly sorry. I blame it because I think people get it wrong. When they talk about laziness, hubris, and what's the other one? Patience. Impatience, actually. When they talk about laziness, and when Larry Wall was talking about laziness, he wasn't really talking about you being a slack ass. He was talking about the fact that what you want to do is write a thing to do a thing you don't want to do again. And laziness has become the watchword of a generation of people. And I blame this fact on the fact that I am no longer allowed to persecute them emotionally or physically for doing shit like that. I was brought up in the bad old days of software development, where if you did something dumb, people tormented you. They made you wear stupid hats. Or they just walked around, they're like, what the hell is wrong with you? Are you an idiot? And this whole no assholes rule thing, you guys ever read this book, the no asshole rule or whatever it is? It's actually a very good book. But honestly, I'm not sure it applies to software. Because the truth is, we all pretty much suck, and to a certain degree, we're all a little bit misanthropic. because we like the machine better than we like the people and that sort of thing, or maybe I'm just projecting onto you, I don't know. But when it comes down to it, people respond to negative pressure pretty well. Like I said, I've been a bouncer for 21 years. I've applied an enormous amount of negative reinforcement to people. I like to refer to these things as educational experiences for them. Because I'm never going to do it to somebody unless they've screwed up. I'm not petty. I don't care. I don't dislike that person. I just need a thing done and they're not doing it. Usually that's, grabbing a waitress's ass or whatever it is. I don't care. You've done a thing and I need you to stop. And now I'm going to provide you some negative reinforcement for this. I think that's the right word. It's been a long time since my classical conditioning days. But ultimately, I think that this laziness thing is really what comes out of that. Now, here's what I think about software. Exactly what I think. I think software and pizza should have similar SLAs. Why do I think this? Because Domino's will generally deliver a pizza to me in about 30 minutes. And I believe very deeply in continuous delivery. Now, continuous delivery is a grail that people seek constantly. Our customers seek it constantly. They do. They want continuous delivery because they think it's the coolest thing ever. Well, the truth is they don't know what it's really like, but it is the coolest thing ever, especially if I can get it every 30 minutes. The Allspa provides this. Etsy they deliver a bajillion times a day. They release code all the time. Continuous delivery has to be the output of continuous integration. It cannot be any other way. You have to have an automated build, automated testing, automated delivery. Now, I am not saying that you should shove your code to production if it makes it through your test suite. That would be stupid, most of the time. But you need to have unattended deployment. You need to be able to do this by having an unattended deployment. Who in here has written a piece of software that requires a human being to type something on the command line during the process? I have. I've done it the last couple of weeks. So it's not, I'm not saying that I'm perfect. I'm saying that if you want continuous delivery, you must have full automation on your delivery cycle. Now, this is the thing that I get really, really angry about. Software developers, you know who you are. You're incredibly lazy. Once again, if you give me a DDL that I have to run before I'm allowed to update your package, you're kind of a jerk. There are tools that will do this. You can detect what version of a database is, what version of a schema is in the database, and you can run those tools in your application. Why should you have to do that and not me? Well, unattended deployment. If I have to do a step, if I have to do a manual step, you have introduced something extraneous. Data migration tools exist. Anybody ever heard of a couple of those, like say Liquibase? It's a really awesome tool because what it does is it lets you version a database across time. That's not perfect, but hell, what you do isn't that complicated. It's software. You're generally making a glorified ledger of some sort. Even like really cool software is some kind of glorified ledger. It's a database thing. I wrote some data over here, and now I'm going to read it and show it to you. To boil it all down, that's what we all do. And nothing that you do is so magical, so amazing, that it has to have really complicated steps in the middle, like data migration. Now, this is the end. You've suffered through the entire thing. But I'm going to tell you how your process probably looks. I know because this is a distillation of 1,000 processes that I've seen. Here's how it starts. Does everybody know who Jonathan Colton is? Wrote this song, Code Monkey. Yeah. So, sorry, Jonathan. You write the code. You got Code Monkey. Code Monkey goes, yeah, I write code. I get code. What does he do? Commits. And then he goes back and compiles. That's probably what happens. Then he tests on some test platform that does not look like production. And then it fails. And then he goes back to coding. Eventually, he declares success. He goes, my test pass. Look how awesome I am. Now, the ops monkey. The code monkey's over here. Now, over here, you got the ops guy who's like, ah! Did you shit on this? Yes. So, the ops monkey gets this request to deploy. And he goes and looks for the notebook, the magical notebook, that has all the instructions for how to do this. Because wikis are just too damn hard to write if you're a developer. I ain't got time to do that. I got features to write. And he fails. And he fails again. And he fails again. He does, because this is what happens in software deployment. If you're the guy who has to deploy some developer software, chances are excellent you didn't do it a few times. So he calls in the code monkey for a sit down. Let's do it right. Dude, why will this not work? I don't know, it works on my machine. What do you mean it works on your machine? Well, it works on the machine that I tested it on. Does that look like production? No. Why not? Too hard to make a production machine. You can't build a test database. Well, whose fault is that? So, they do the sit down, time pass. Eventually, the code monkey remembers a crucial step, and the ops monkey make that step happen. And deployment. Yay. And the customer's vaguely happy. Now, this is probably what happened in the last 1,000 software release cycles that ever happened. But it isn't how it has to happen. Because the one thing that happened here is that the ops monkey really forgot to write that step down in the notebook that he's going to lose again anyway, because it's going to be a year before he has to do another deployment. If you think that's unusual or weird, I promise you, the previous job that I had, sometimes it was a year or more between deployments. Not necessarily because it took a year to do development, but because development didn't start until halfway through a year. And you want to tell you, try to deploy to WebSphere a complicated application that doesn't have automated deployment when the last time you did it was a different century. It's not cool. Now, this is what it can be like. I know it can be like this because I have made this happen. So your code monkey writes its code, commits its source code control. The CI engine grabs the code, runs all the tests, and notifies the code monkey that he is an idiot. Now, this is its job. He's not really an idiot. He just made a mistake. So eventually he makes it pass. And a release is executed. We have drawn a real line in the sand. And we've looked at it really hard. And we've said, that's real. That when everybody declares that's real, and it turns from sand to stone, we're not changing it ever again, that's a real release. So, the artifact that we're building in our continuous integration system delivers itself to a repository of some sort. That might be the file system, that might be a Maven repository, it could be an RPM repository that gets maybe a push to a satellite or something along those lines. And the two people involved here, the code monkey and the ops monkey, have to agree that it is time to promote. We're going to push this code somewhere else. We're going to really do a deployment. And then the artifact deploys itself. Now, if you think this is impossible, clearly you do not understand the power of bash. But let's assume you do. Maybe this isn't crazy. This is the least crazy. This is the room to whom this is probably the least crazy. Because usually I'm talking to a bunch of hardcore enterprise system administrators or a bunch of serious developers. And they're like, oh, you can't possibly do that. It's too hard. Well, that's because you're kind of a jerk. But if it does, then we can update localized infrastructure, which is to say, migrate your database. And the most important thing is the user showers you both with beer and praise. Now, I put showers with beer and praise in here, and I thought really hard about taking it out because I don't want to be showered with beer. But I left it. The most important thing is that everybody ends up at happy hour. because this process happened automatically. This is what we are trying to achieve, and this is what is possible if you will communicate, you will apply discipline to your process, and you will actually try. Thank you for your time. I am probably supposed to ask you for questions.
Do you live in a van down by the river?
No, I live in Birmingham. But I am loud, and I am kind of angry. Yes?
I actually do network infrastructure.
Pardon me?
I do a lot of network infrastructure
Sure.
building, and I often find project managers who insist on using Agile with network infrastructure, which is just like gas and matches.
Gas and matches.
So I was just wondering if you have like processes that are not software-like. How do you get people out of that? Agile works for everything,
Out of the Agile works for everything?
Yeah.
So I do not believe that Agile works for everything. In fact, I have not seen Agile implemented very well frequently. So the problem could be that Agile would work for everything, and you just haven't seen it work right. The problem could be that there really is a disparity between what Agile can do and some sort of very rote process that might be what you're talking about. The problem also might be you. Because, I mean, I'm not pulling any punches here. Maybe you're just being stubborn. Whatever the problem is, ultimately, the people involved in it have to talk to the other people about the fact that it's a problem. Now, one of the issues, one of the real problems with there not being any managers in here is that usually the person who's going, I don't really need to talk to you about that, you just do what I tell you, is a manager. And that's okay. They're your boss, they get to tell you what to do, et cetera, et cetera. But if they're uncommunicative, then they're the problem. And your job, your responsibility then, is to determine how to breach that lack of communication. Maybe you do what I did and go get yourself a new job. Maybe you do what I did prior to that, and you make yourself really super indispensable so that whatever you say is totally okay. And you walk in, you're a complete jerk, you're not paying any attention. They're like, because they've never had anybody walk in and call them an actual jerk at work. You're not letting me get my work done, you are impeding my success. How? How am I doing that? Then the conversation starts. But the problem has to be a case where people are willing to bridge. If nothing else, versioning and communication, these are the things that you have to take out of this talk. Communication, really, not even versioning, because versioning is a kind of communication. But communication is where we all fail. We literally are some of the worst things in the world at communicating. The reason that is we're trying to communicate a very, very complex idea that only lives inside our head. It can only live inside there. I do a bunch of work with a particular group of people, and this guy comes up to me, and when I was working a table for them, and he goes, so you don't believe, you're a skeptic. Yes, I am in fact a skeptic. I'm in fact a epistemological nihilist, but that's a completely different thing. And he, well, what's that mean? I'm like, well, I don't really believe you can know anything. I think it's very difficult to know anything. Well, you mean I can't know that my wife loves me? I assure you, sir, you cannot know that your wife loves you. You can believe it. You can have all sorts of experiences, but you can't know because she can't make you know, and you can't climb inside and see it. This is the problem, is that the guy that's preventing you from doing this, whoever he is, has a completely different worldview that you can't see, and he might be reluctant to share with you, and yours is much more tactile. You do things. He allegedly thinks about things. So you do stuff. And so your thought processes might be completely orthogonal to each other. And it's your now it's your responsibility. You have to be the communicator, because clearly the other people aren't. Anybody else? Questions?
What is your opinion of Scrum?
I love it when people start questions with, what's your opinion? So I think Scrum is a really interesting tool. Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. The question was, what's my opinion of Scrum? So my opinion of all management types of things, all that classification, Agile and Scrums and those sorts of things, those behaviors, is that if everybody believes, I think software only works if you're a socialist. You don't have to be a real socialist. In fact, I strongly urge you not to be a real socialist. But if you are if you're working in a group, you have to be kind of a socialist, because everybody has to buy in equally. If you don't like it and you kind of fight against it, then every technique fails. If there are people who push back, every technique fails. I'm not saying that I think all techniques could succeed if everybody falls forward, because that's equally stupid. But I think Scrum is a perfectly valid way that people could work. But I think that about practically every project management technique. Waterfall clearly gets work done and certainly makes a lot of money. But it can work. One more. Anybody? Awesome. Thanks for your time.
Your customers rely on your website or application. If it's slow or non-responsive, it infuriates your users and costs you money. Keeping your business-critical systems humming along requires insight into what they're doing. Your system metrics tell stories that can reveal performance bottlenecks, resource limitations, and other problems. But how do you keep an eye on all of your system's performance metrics in real time and record this data for later analysis? Enter Longview, the new way to see what's really going on under the hood. The Longview dashboard lets you visualize the status of all your systems, providing you with a bird's-eye view of your entire fleet. You can sort by CPU, memory, swap, processes load, and network usage. Click a specific system to access its individual dashboard, then click and drag to zoom in on choke points and get more detail. Comprehensive network data, including inbound and outbound traffic, is available on the Network tab, and disk writes and free space on the Disks tab, while the Process Explorer displays usage statistics for individual processes. The System Info tab shows listening services, active connections, and available updates. Adding Longview to a system is easy. Just click the button, copy the one-line installation command, then run the command on your Linux system to complete the process. The agent will begin collecting data and sending it to Longview. Then the graphs start rolling. Use Longview to gain visibility into your servers, so when your website or app heats up, it stays up.
When we created Asterisk over a decade ago, we could not have imagined that Asterisk would not only become the most widely adopted open source communication software on the planet, but that it would impact the entire industry in the way that it has. Today, Asterisk has found its way into more than 170 countries and virtually every Fortune 1000 company.
The success of Asterisk has enabled a transition of power from the hands of the traditional proprietary phone vendors into the hands of the users and the administrators of phone systems. Using this power, our customers have created all sorts of business-changing applications, from small office phone systems to mission-critical call centers to international carrier networks. In fact, there's even an entire country whose communications infrastructure runs on Asterisk.
Digium has always been about creating technology that expands communications capabilities in ways that we could never have imagined. And that's part of what's game-changing about Digium. Today, we're doing it again, this time by introducing a new family of HD IP phones that extends control of the user all the way to the desktop.
The launch of these new products represents the next phase in Digium's history of innovation. These are the first and only IP phones designed to fully leverage the power of Asterisk. When we first discussed our expectations for building a family of phones for use with Asterisk, our requirements were pretty simple. We asked the team to build the phones such that they were easy to install, integrate, provision, and use. I think you'll soon agree our engineers have delivered on that goal. User feedback is validating that when it comes to operation with Asterisk-based systems, including our own SwitchVox-based product, these are the easiest to use, best integrated, most interoperable products on the market today. The Digium family of phones will initially include 3 IP desk phones, uniquely designed to complement any Asterisk or SwitchVox-based solution. These phones are different for a number of reasons. First, they're exclusively designed for use with Asterisk. Secondly, we've made it really easy to auto-discover and provision the phones. Next, we've made it easy for the phones to access information inside of Asterisk, allowing tight coupling between an application and the phone. Additionally, we've created an applications engine that allows users and developers to create and run their own apps on the phone. And finally, we've done all of this at a very compelling price point. At Digium, we're always thinking of ways to give our customers the best value in business phone systems and also give them the power to create their own solutions for any communications challenge.
We'll continue to push the boundaries, not only to make Asterisk cooler, faster, and more technologically feature-rich, but to make Asterisk and VoIP communications even easier.
And together, we'll change the way the world communicates.
Again.
Cloud stacks are everywhere.
This is the way to better utilize all your resources, and it makes managing all your resources pretty easy.
All of the innovation is happening in open source.
The collaborative nature and of the community and the speed at which these deficiencies, these bugs are getting discovered and then fixed is a thing that really shows the power of the open source community.
It is global, and it's definitely because of the users.
Community people are extremely friendly and always ready to help.
If you go onto IRC any day, you'll see these guys helping each other out, and they're all doing it like in a selfless manner.
The product is transparent for everyone. Everyone can look at the code base. Everyone can see how Cloud Stack is being built. Nothing is proprietary. Everything is open.
In many ways, it's absolutely vital to the ongoing health of Cloud Stack.
The most exciting event in recent memory for me was our first developer boot camp. And our call gave people, I think, maybe 2 weeks notice to come attend. I was expecting 25 or 30 people. So we ended up with 87 people and had to go get more chairs into the room twice.
Everything within cloud computing is commodity and is open source. And so I don't think that you'll see anywhere where open source is not pervasive in cloud computing. And so I think it's an assumption. I think when you talk about cloud computing, you're really talking about open source cloud computing.
CloudStack is a robust solution for large deployments.
You have dozens of data centers and thousands of servers in each data center. These hardware is going to fail, and CloudStack is designed to handle, number one, that mass scale. Number two, it's designed to handle the failure that inevitably happens in large deployments.
We started working on CloudStack over 4 years ago, and it was the original set of people working on it had a background of delivering software to telcos and service providers.
Lots of QA, lots of users actually using it.
High availability is the key feature. Multiple hypervisor support, different network models. You can pick up whatever suits you better.
Cloud Stack Management Server can be deployed in different physical machines.
It definitely has a huge footprint. It's being deployed everywhere.
There's a major movie studio that they were using CloudStack. They were using it to transcode video, and I thought that was terribly fascinating. What I found more fascinating is what they did during lunch, where they would spin up 50 or 60 game servers. Then as soon as lunch was over, they would destroy all the instances and go back to doing real work.
CloudStack is vast. It touches so many different aspects, and there's no one person that's kind of like a master of all those realms.
I think Cloud Stack as a project is going to be one of the leaders simply because it's some of the most featureful and robust platforms out there.
I don't see any limits to the Cloud Stack.
Most enterprises today realize that usernames and passwords alone aren't enough to keep their network safe from unauthorized intrusions. That's why two-factor authentication has gotten so popular lately. It adds that extra layer of protection enterprise networks need to stay safe. But what you may not know is that some two-factor authentication solutions, they're better than others, like two-factor strong authentication with Wicked. Wicked goes beyond other authentication systems by being less expensive, easier to implement, and easier to use, giving you software-based token clients built to run on all major devices and OSs, including iOS and Android. These tokens utilize a public-private key combination that's generated on device, so there aren't any shared secrets flying around for attackers to hijack, or which require any special handling. Instead, all keys are kept secure and private between the requesting token and your server, which you control in-house, making it the most secure way possible to perform authentication encryption. And with an extensive, flexible API and support for protocols like LDAP and Radius, Wicked works with any enterprise network architecture to protect the IT systems vital to your enterprise. Download your Wicked free trial today, regardless of whether you're considering two-factor authentication for the first time or just ready to ditch your existing expensive key fob system. We can help with easy-to-implement, easy-to-use, strong authentication from Wicked.